Well, ahoy there, Star Wars adventurers, and welcome to episode 2 of Beyond the Barrier, exploring the mysteries of Skeleton Crew. I am your host, Pete Fletzer, and along with my co-host and co-pilot, my Star Wars first mate, Mr. Nick Mielke. Each week, we will guide you through the twists, the turns, and the treasures of the Disney Plus Star Wars show, Skeleton.
You are right. Oh, Captain, my Captain. And tonight we are diving deep into episode 3 of Skeleton Crew, which is titled Very Interesting as an Astrogation Problem. And we've got an exciting show lined up. And here's what you're going to be able to expect.
That is right. In the Scuttlebutt, we're going to kick things off with our first reactions to the episode using just one word to sort of set the stage.
After that, we're going to navigate through what we call plotting the course. This is breaking down the major story beats, following the map, the path, the journey. And we're going to talk about those beats and discuss what stood out to us.
And then after that, we're going to go into what we call buried treasure, where we're going to dig up Easter eggs, references, and hidden gems, things you might have missed along the way.
Yes. Finally, after that, in Buccos and Codgers, that's you guys, our patrons. We're going to hand it over to you, our patron supporters. We want to hear your thoughts, your theories, your hot takes, the things that you saw in these episodes as we go through this every week.
And if you're catching this on the podcast stream, you are missing out on all the fun live action. Join us live every Thursday night. We have couple days after the episode airs, and you can become a patron at patreon.com/the SSW network so that you can be a part of the show. Not only can you hang out with us in real time, but we're also going to give you a link so that we can take your calls live and talk about what you have to say about Skeleton Crew.
And there is one warning. Here be spoilers. And we will hold nothing back every week as we dive into the plot points, the details, the Easter eggs, and all of our wildest expectations, not expectations, maybe expectations or speculations. All of that to say, if you're tuning in on the podcast, if you're tuning in right now live, if you haven't watched episode 3 yet, this is your chance to take a pause, go check it out, and then come back and join us again.
Exactly. So grab your maps, raise your solar sails, and join us on this epic journey. But first, let's hit the Scuttlebutt. Nick, the Scuttlebutt, every week we are going to give our first impression, that one word that you used to describe how you felt or what the show meant, or just give me episode 3 in one word. Go.
I'm going to give you a hyphenated one word I can. My hyphenated one word is wide-eyed. I came into this episode. I was hooked last week. That was my word. This week, I was wide-eyed. I was ready for this adventure. I wanted to see how they were going to get out. I mean, when we get to Khy'm and the little moon that they're on, all that stuff, like, this show is continuing to connect with my inner 80s child, and I'm just watching it like I did as a kid, sitting on my knees in front of the TV, wide-eyed, locked in, ready to go.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a word that is, I don't know, it feels like a cop-out, but it's the only thing that kept hitting me over and over after I watched this episode, and then when I watched it the second time. And I'm going to get away with 2 words by making it a hashtag, and I'm going to call it hashtag Star Wars, because to me, this was the most Star Wars show that I have seen since the Marshall episode of The Mandalorian. It did everything right. It brought all the right pieces of Star Wars together into, 37 minutes long. And it just, and the great thing was, the difference between this and the Marshall was on Tatooine and was Boba Fett armor and really went for the things we recognize, the things we've seen. This did it by just sort of taking me back to that time when I saw The Empire Strikes Back or even Return of the Jedi, in that it was new Star Wars. It was that adventure, the feeling that I had, but it was all right there. And I was so ready for it. And I absolutely loved that. So, well, that's the Scuttlebutt. Now we're going to take a look at the show beat by beat, talk about some things that happened, and then sort of talk about our feelings about it along the way. We're going to watch the chat, see what you have to say about it while we go. But Nick, let's plot the course. Well, this was episode number 3, and it was called Very Interesting as an Astrogation Problem, directed by David Lowery, who also directed episode 2, and it had a runtime of 48 minutes. No, it didn't. It was 37 minutes. I'm sorry. Yes. I was close. I was only off by 11 minutes. The Disney Plus description was: a mysterious stranger offers to help our heroes. Before we dig into it, I just want to say it struck me that we didn't really get Jude Law at all in the first 2 episodes until this one, and it felt perfect. It didn't feel like we missed him, but he felt like he should be there, which I think is a tribute to Jude Law and probably why he got a star on the Walk of Fame this week.
For sure. Yeah, you get the teeny tiny tease at the beginning of the first episode, right as he gets mutinied. Although technically we don't know that at that point because he's got the helmet on. And then we get him as the closing kind of teaser cliffhanger at the end of episode 2, steps out of the shadows. Hey, I can help you, wink and a nod, and we're off waiting for another week.
Absolutely. And then this episode starts, but this one starts on at Aden, and it gives us a look at this suburban utopia hellscape. Honestly, I mean, it felt so sterile. It felt a lot like where we saw Cyril Karn live in Andor, but then we cut through all that. We see a lone security robot walking through the streets, and then we get to the cul-de-sac where Fern's mother lives, and all the parents are there. And it we see what I found a little bit jarring, and Nick, I don't know if you picked up on it the first time. We're literally in Wilhelm's what's his name? Is it Will whatever Wim's father's name?
Yeah, Wim's dad. Totally blanking. Go ahead.
Yeah, but we're in his head in that all the conversation happening around him is muffled. And he's, I'm checking the volume. I'm checking to make sure that I'm watching it right and everything. And it was a great effect to show how bothered Wim's father is by this entire thing. Wendell. Thank you.
Yes, Wendell. Yeah. Great name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, it was such a good parenting moment. This is going to be one for anybody who knows this show, who knows us. West Wing. There's an episode of the West Wing in season 4, 3 or 4. No, season 4, at the end of season 4, something major happens and the president goes through the same thing. The audio drops. He's in his head. He's connected. He's disconnected. And it felt very much like that, which adds a lot of emotional weight, certainly as a parent watching this episode. And these are parents whose kids are gone, and they all have different. The thing I loved was all the different reactions.
Yeah.
You've got Fern's mom who's like, it's fine. Trust the system. They'll be back soon. Right. Wendell's on to something. Like, he was the one out in the woods. He's seen some stuff. And then you've got KB's moms who, they have a different concern and thought. We don't really get a lot of Neil connection. The parents are there, but it's different. And you and I are parents, and we know other people with kids. And this is exactly what would happen if something happened to 4 kids that we all know together. There'd be 5 different reactions from 4 sets of parents. Yeah. So that hit me, from a parenting standpoint, as very realistic of everybody handling this situation in a different way.
Yep. And then the doorbell rings, and at the door is one of those frightening security droids. Mm-hmm. And they say, okay, what are we going to do? And essentially they say, the supervisor says, we can't contact the Republic. It's just essentially it's protocol. Nick, who's the supervisor? Or do you want to save that for your theories later?
I'll jump onto it right now.
All right.
I think the supervisor is also a droid. I think the supervisor is like a battle droid. This is like a maintain the status quo kind of situation. This is a planet controlled by, at what point, the Old Republic, the Empire, whoever's, maintaining this grip and this control. Right. And it's kind of one of those, like, don't ask it's Pleasantville. What's outside of Pleasantville? Don't ask any questions. Yep. Truman Show, take your pick. We've seen all these different shows and movies over the year. But I think about Clone Wars, the final season of Clone Wars, those opening episodes, Anakin and Obi-Wan are on the bridge, and it's the commando battle droid, whatever it's called. I forget. It's got the flat top visor. Mm-hmm. And they're like, when you take that one out, they all stop. The command droid or whatever. Again, terrible fan. Don't remember the name. But I think the supervisor is like, it's the Great Oz. It's the thing behind the curtain. And I think the droids are doing the business that they've been programmed to keep this society in check, this planet in check. So I will be very surprised if the supervisor turns out to be, Governor Price or some other something. Yeah. I think the supervisor is a higher up droid that's running this system that is kind of very finely balanced.
I like that, and it is freaking scary. It's a sinister way to tell a story, and I love it. So after that, we then see Jod and the kids making their escape. They're breaking out, and the kids are questioning Jod. And this is one of the things that I loved about this episode, and I love about the writing that I'm seeing, is the kids question Jod. They say, well, why didn't you escape sooner if you could have used the Force to take the key? And he says, what's the point if I don't have a ship? What's the point of setting myself free if I don't have a ship? Which is a great answer. Same question when they land on the moon a little bit later, and they say, why didn't you park closer? Because all of us are thinking, yeah, why didn't he park closer? Sort of like, why the hell did Orson Krennic park his ship at Jyn Erso's parents' house, like miles away? That makes no sense. But in this case, Fern picked up on it, was like, yeah, he's hiding from something. But I love that they asked that question, and he had a good answer. But he reassures them that he knows somebody who can help them out and help them get home. Mm-hmm. They sneak out through the crowded part of the bar. I thought that was an interesting thing. Did I read too much into it, Nick, or was that just kind of a cool choice that he gave the kids? You can either go down the empty hallway, or you can go through with the kids, or with all the other life forms. Did you make anything more out of that than it was, or?
I liked it because I thought, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you go the empty way, you're going to be noticed. There's plenty of opportunities to blend in. I'll be perfectly honest. When he said that, the scene that clicked in my head is the scene in Hook when Robin Williams is trying to get across like the pirate island to go try and sneak and grab the hook or whatever it is he's supposed to do. And he's still dressed in like slacks and a dress shirt. And so they're like throwing a cloak on him and a hat. And they're like, they even tell him, they're like, drag your left leg or your arm's dead at your side, drool out of the side of your, like, be a pirate, blend in.
Yep.
We've seen this kind of stuff because we saw it in Kenobi when they escape and, Leia's under the coat, the big trench coat, and everybody lost their mind over it. But you're like, there's chaos and there's people walking. People don't pay attention to people. We see this every day in real life.
That's true.
You have a better opportunity to take 5 people and spread out through a crowd than to have 5 people huddled up in an empty hallway, because all it takes is one person to go, what are you all doing here? Right. But if it's a pirate island, a port, craziness going on, it's, oh, there's a kid over there. Wait, there's a kid over there. By the time you start going, why have I seen 4 kids in the last 4 minutes? It's too late. They've gotten to where they need to go. So I thought that worked well. And I wanted to come to your other point, is in the writing of this show, this isn't that show where kids talk like grown-ups, because sometimes we get that in some of these big IP shows. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Like, kids are doing what kids do. I have 4 kids. You have 2 kids. We're around all of our friends who have kids. Kids call you on your stuff. And these kids are going, what the hell, man? Why didn't you try to get out of here already? Like, that's what a kid would do. And these kids talk like kids. They act like kids. And I think that's another thing that makes this show so endearing for me, is it feels real. It doesn't feel like a kid giving a monologue about hyperspace trade lanes and, oh, I knew this because I read it in a book. Right. It's a kid going, wait, I get to get in that thing and shoot a cannon? Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I think that's really illustrated well when they're in the little ferry going over, and Jod leaves his gun on the bench, and Neil just picks it up and is looking at a gun. And then it's funny because it tells you everything. That's what's so great about the directing and the acting in the show and the writing. You learn so much about the characters just by how they react to things. The way Neil picks up and realizes it's a gun and kind of puts it down, is like, nope, this isn't for me. Similarly later on in the show when Wim gets in the guns on the ship, and he's thrilled. He's like excited.
Beaming.
This is what I've been waiting for. So, it's those sort of subtle things that are so different about this show and so well done that it's easy to overlook them, but it's why the show is working, I think, so well for a lot of people. So as they're on their way to get to the ship, I haven't seen many, it's funny, you do the show a couple days after all the other Easter egg shows and things. Not a lot of people have picked up on the fact that when they're coming out, when Jod sees the ship, which is the Onyx Cinder, we haven't heard that name yet, but if you got the Lego set, that's what it's called. When he sees the ship, he says, "Not that one." Like he recognizes it. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Like he knows that particular ship. So I'm curious if that means anything, or it could just be that, again, something I haven't heard a lot of people talking about. The Onyx Cinder has those gray and light gray stripes, like a lot of the other pirate ships had, like they had in the pirate ships in Mando season 3. So maybe he just recognizes it as a pirate ship, or maybe he recognizes that specific ship.
So that was something that stood out to me, and I wanted to talk about that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I didn't read it as he knew it. Oh, you're in the Onyx Cinder. This isn't the Black Pearl. Right. I read it as that's an old ship. And it goes back to the mysteries of what's going on with this planet, something that's that old. If, you were told, hey, we're going to go on a cruise, and you show up at a harbor on the coastal New Jersey and there's a tall ship there, not a Carnival Cruise Line, you'd be like, that thing, that old ship. I feel like it's that was the connection I made with it, which was him going, it's kind of Leia looking at the Falcon going, that hunk of junk. That was what it felt like to me.
That's great. That's a really good way to look at it. So cool. So they do finally get to the ship, and Leia Fern, who says a Leia line, that was too easy, essentially, right? And kind of like, I don't trust that. But as they're getting ready to go, they realize that they need to retrieve SM-33. And Jod says they can leave without the droid, but ultimately the kids show their loyalty and say, "We're going to go get him if you don't." And he says, "All right, well, I'll go get him." And during his attempt to, I love his, what's his name? S-37 something. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. But during his attempt to get SM-33 out, first of all, there were a couple of Easter eggs in there, which we'll get to in a couple minutes, but he catches the attention of an Ishi Tib. We haven't really seen too many of them. We saw one in Ahsoka on the bridge of the Republic ship. But
the one in the beginning of Mando season 3, when he goes to when he kills the people in the meat packing room, and then he goes to get his bounty. That was an Ishi Tib in that.
Right, he's got the head in the bag. That was cool. It was interesting too, because again, another line. I felt like that, and maybe that's why I went with #StarWars for my description of this episode, because between Jod doing the Jedi trick that Kenobi did to make the noise to pull the attention of the guards, to whereas Jod is leaving in the Ishi Tib, who was voiced by
Alfred Molina,
Satipo from Indy,
or Dr. Octopus, depending on how old you are.
Right. Well, he says as Jod says, I'm just gonna get out of here. And the line that he says is, well, that's the real trick, isn't it? Which, of course,
big Han Solo all over.
Big Han Solo vibes. Yep, 100%. So, of course, a chaotic chase ensues. I love we cut back to the kids who are just sort of arguing as to whether or not he's really a Jedi. Even like there's a million ways you can make it. You can move a key. You can use repulsor lifts. You can use mirrors. You can use string magnets. I just loved that whole interaction between the kids. It was very much, what it reminded me of, and this may be a stretch, but to me, it reminded me of the scene in E.T. where Elliot is fighting with the kids while they're playing D&D, and they're just kind of like just arguing. Like it's mundane, childish arguments, but that's what they do. Yep. So he gets his way back to the ship, and I love that you could see the battle starting outside the ship as they're talking. He gets on board. And then we had, again, maybe one of the most Star Warsy things that I can recall in a long time, of him trying to figure out the way to get out. He's still connected to the fuel lines, and he makes a giant mess of things as they're leaving. Nick, what did you think of that scene? To me, it was a great Star Wars scene.
Everything about this scene, like, it just kept checking boxes. It's like if you went down a list and it was like this thing and this thing and this thing, and it's like Oprah giving out gifts. You get a toy and you get a memory, and because there were so many things in there. The line, the Han Solo line, that was the thing that immediately I was like, oh, like, I think I actually said something out loud, like, oh, he said the thing. Like, it felt like one of those.
Yep.
The conversation about how did he do it? Could it be magnets? Could it be string? Could it be whatever? I thought about Kenobi, when you have Haja, who's played by Kumail Nanjiani, pretending to be a Jedi, and he's got all these little tricks. Like, it wasn't necessarily, maybe it was intended to remind us of that. It reminded me of that because I watched Star Wars.
Right.
The fuel line connected to the thing. It felt like Force Awakens when Poe and Finn are trying to escape in the TIE fighter at the beginning. They're connected to that docking thing. They can't get away. But it also is just, every drop of it is fun. The quips, like the little lines, like the way this is written. I love words. I tend to use too many of them when I'm trying to express thoughts. I kind of exist in that territory of, like, if you use 5 words when you could have used 20, you're not trying hard enough. Like, the little side quotes, and Jude Law is so good at this, and the kids are so good at this. Again, not just that they sound like kids, but the acting from these 4 children portraying these 4 characters, like, it's so natural. It doesn't feel stilted. It feels fun. And it's these little bits of, like, of course this is happening right now. Of course we can't get out of here when we want to. It just, again, it just feeds into the vibe of the whole show.
For sure. You're right. And again, that's what's capturing that really well done 80s movies, the Goonies, E.T., all those. So they narrowly escape. And while they're sitting there talking, Jod is eating something. The kids are hungry, puts it down. And one of the things that I have to call out, because I thought it was an interesting piece to notice, was Jod has no love for droids. Very Din Djarin of that. In fact, when he finishes his bowl of food, he puts it down and he tells SM-33 to clean it up. And you can definitely sense there's some tension there. You can tell he didn't like going back to go get him. You can tell he didn't like seeing the droids in the in that room where he had to go get them there. His comment at first when they say we have to get SM-33 is, he's just a droid, right? There's no, or not he, it's just a droid. So he definitely has some issues there, and I don't know if that's sort of an insight into his character, but it certainly tells the difference between the kids and him when it comes to loyalty and things like that. But then we start to really, what's interesting is the pace at which some of the mysteries are starting to be explored. Whether we have answers or not is another thing, but they're starting to explore the questions that we as the audience has when Neil says, did we really think that there's treasure at home? And most of them, they all say no. But Neil then wonders out loud if it might have something to do with the great work. And that leads the kids to really start piecing the pieces together, recognizing that their parents have these boring administrative jobs and that they're focused on money, and Wim pulls he's got his credits, and they're looking at it just as John walks in. Do you want to comment on any of that piece of the conversation?
I do. As a hardcore longtime lover of The Sopranos, I think I have decided that Aten is a money laundering planet for the benefit of Emperor Palpatine and the First Order.
It's the bada bing of.
It is the bada bing. They are running money through this planet. They have a whole group of people, bureaucrats, whoever they need to bring in money, send it out, whatever they're doing. This is very Star Wars in itself, because what did we jokingly complain about in the 90s? And then as time went on, in the prequels, it was about trade routes and taxation.
Right.
This isn't unfamiliar for Star Wars. So I think this planet, the treasure, because you have these, scumbag bartenders and pirates and whoever at Port Borgo going, that's not real. That's a mystery or treasure untold. Right. treasure means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But if the general knowledge is that's where the money is, like,
yeah,
that planet is Wall Street, but as a planet, or that planet is, I don't know, somewhere where there's lots of money. I think that's what it is. And I think their parents are, again, being led by this autonomous droid system that receives a program and instructions. And, part of this is going to feed into, as you said, I think recently when you were on Screen Crush, the wider narrative of, what happens in the sequel trilogy era and this era post, after Return of the Jedi.
Yep. Yeah, I do like how they're kind of bringing it together without overtly doing it. I think that's kind of what we're starting to see here, which is great. A little later, all the kids are asleep. Again, this was a great kind of something that was so much what a child would do, right? When John says, "You guys got to get some sleep," and Fern says, "I'm not tired," and the next scene you see her just zonked out, right? Practically drooling. But all the kids are asleep except KB. And when Jod walks in, she says to him, she's calculated the odds of him being a Jedi. And Jod replies that not everything can be calculated. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. And then he uses the Force, or appears to use the Force, to turn off some lights, maintaining the question, keeping it going. Now might be a good time to ask you, Nick, do you think he's a Jedi? What do you think his story is?
I don't think he's a Jedi. I think he's a Force user. That's what I've settled on. He has said now, and maybe this is a red herring, maybe this is a way for him to cover for himself.
Right.
He's used some little phrases and expressions that feel very Yoda, very Jedi training like. Right. The distance between you and the key is an illusion. There was a couple in these, in this episode, things that felt like that little Confucius say, little nuggets of wisdom, that kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, I think he is a survivor, a chameleon who has Force abilities that he's figured out. And that's allowed him to kind of be this scoundrel who can do. He's Ezra. He's Ezra Bridger. Yeah. Ezra had the ability to know, ooh, I need to run now. I need to do this kind of thing. And if KG says it, maybe Hondo taught him some things he learned from Ezra. I love the idea that he's a Force user. He doesn't have to be a Jedi. That's something that we have not explored a lot of in Star Wars overall. Yeah,
and I think it was hinted at in the sequel trilogy. We've seen a little bit of it here and there, that you don't have to be a Jedi, but you can be Force sensitive. Yep, absolutely. Hey, maybe he's not Broom Boy. Maybe he's not. Okay. So the crew finally arrives at the moon. One of the things that I just loved was Wim playing on the cargo lift. He's just playing. It's like it's a big giant toy. The ship is a big giant toy to him.
Yeah, she says, "What are you doing?" Yeah, he's like, "It's fun.
It's fun. I'm playing." And again, as I mentioned before, Jod lands far away, and Fern gets it. Fern's like, no, he's trying to hide the ship. He's trying to be kind of cagey with it. And he admits to the kids that the person that they're going to meet, or the creature they're going to meet, he doesn't always trust. And he had to have a very interesting conversation, similar to what we talked about with Greg a little bit earlier, about a joke that the kids don't get, or in this case, it was a phrase the kids don't get. He says, "She'll stab you in the back," and they thought like that literally meant that she'll stab them in the back. But so it was an interesting sort of life lesson for the kids, and it showed a moment too of him kind of a little twinkle in his eye of, yeah, I kind of care about these kids in a way, right? So finally they get up, they cross this moon in some of the most beautifully shot, I'm sure it was the volume, but it was absolutely beautiful silhouette against the planet while they're on the moon, which apparently has atmosphere, which is fine. I don't care. It's Star Wars. I'm not going to get into the scientific aspects of it. But as they walk across, one thing, and when they landed, one thing I noticed was the music. It was very 1950s sci-fi, which I felt was really very cool. They walk across the desert. They're met by a handful of the greeting droids, the telltale droids from Jabba's palace. Just basically the eyes on the stalks, and But all this time, we recognize that Khy'm, who they're going to meet, has been talking to somebody about being prepared to capture him, and she says that she will delay him as long as possible. It makes sense. And this is where we hear a name that we haven't heard yet. It's the third name for this character, Crimson Jack. Nick, what do we know about the name Crimson Jack?
Crimson Jack. Oh, Crimson Jack, you scoundrel, you. Crimson Jack is a name and a character from old Star Wars comic books. I don't know how old because I don't read Star Wars comic books, but as I was watching some clips, seeing some things, I believe this is actually from the original, like early 1977, 78 run of the original Marvel Star Wars comic books.
Yep.
I know nothing about the character. I did not have time to do a little deeper dive, a deeper dig, other than he has like the old, I call it like the old British boxer mustache, like the guy that's got both fists out and it comes down. It's from the from the side chops up through the mustache, no beard underneath, like that good connecting point. Like this is a scoundrel rapscallion, if you will.
Right.
But this is a name that has existed in other Star Wars media in the past. So it could be, an Easter egg. It could be a throwback. It could be something for people our age that actually read the comics. But at this point, we have a character in a main character in a show that has had 3 different names.
Yep.
Captain Silvo, Jod Nanawood, and Crimson Jack. So who are you really, sir?
Who are you? Yes. And so they get in there, and then Khy'm boasts. Khy'm is this little owl cat creature, which is kind of a throwback to all the great, cool little wise old owl characters that have appeared in things like Clash of the Titans and all of those sort of things. But she's not truly an owl because she's got like cat features, but a really interesting, and StarWars.com today said that it's a character that has not had its race identified or its species identified yet, which is cool. I don't need to know it. I think she's very cool. Her voice was recognizable, but wasn't. I did some research on the actress who did it, and I couldn't find anything that, like I said, oh, there's the connection. But one of the things she did say in that recognizable voice is that she has trinkets and tokens from 1,000 worlds, and Fern says there's 1,000 worlds. So this again is a little bit of insight into how we get some even better insight, but the first sort of look at how protected the children are, how little they know about the Star Wars universe, the universe that they live in. She starts asking the children about with John. They explain that they're looking for Atten, and she is excited. She rushes to go get more information. She brings back a scroll, and she reveals that Atten has been purposely hidden from the galaxy. And she says that there's no map to Atten, and explains to them that it is one of the jewels of the Old Republic, 9 planets hidden, but they were all destroyed long ago, except for one, which was Atten. Last piece I'll say about this, and then Nick, I want to get your thoughts on what this all means. She starts asking the kids to get some details, trying to figure out how to get there, how to find it on the map. And one of the kids says they've learned about Coruscant and Alderaan at school, in which she says, Alderaan missed the war, did you? I thought that was a fantastic line because it was a comical way of reminding us who watch Star Wars. We knew what happened to Alderaan. The kids didn't. And she started to piece it all together. Nick, from what we learned about this, how does this play into your theory? And what do you think? How does this tie into the greater Star Wars universe?
I think the tone we keep hitting on is this is a planet lost / frozen in time. There's a barrier. It's isolated. I mean, honestly, I think the example I keep coming back to the most is the Truman Show. If anybody's ever watched the Truman Show, Jim Carrey, he's raised in this like contained bubble, controlled life, narrative, all those things. And this is what that feels like.
Yep.
This society has been, everything they get is controlled. It's state-run media, whether it's the Republic, the Empire. They say in that opening scene when the parents are together, we should appeal to the Republic. They don't say the old Republic. They also don't say the new Republic. They say the Republic very specifically.
Yep.
So this is a society frozen in time. These kids have heard of Alderaan because Alderaan was a significant planet, but they haven't heard that Alderaan got blasted to smithereens.
Yep.
And so it feeds into, there is something sketchy with this planet. What is its purpose? What is the role that it fills in this greater overall Star Wars galaxy narrative, for sure?
Yep. So Khy'm is continuing to try to figure out how to narrow down out of the thousands of planets, the millions of planets, how to find it. Then she sees Fern's backpack, and she sees some symbols on there, which she decodes, and she starts working it all out. And she says something like, "Oh, yes." And he says, "Did you figure it out?" And she implies, no, not yet. So, and then that's when Jod recognizes that she's stalling and discovers her communicator, which has been open the whole time. And we learn that there's some X-Wings inbound. And Khy'm tells the kids to run, but not before KB checks to see if she's okay, because they blast out. Jod does a little bit of sort of makes a mess so they can get out the door. KB checks on Khy'm, who says, "Trust your head," and offers her that if she ever needs Khy'm, she can reach out to her. She can do that. And then the kids run away with Jod, and Khy'm seems a little bit concerned that they're leaving, but not so much so that she continue. I found that was an interesting sort of concern about the kids. Hey, because what is it? Khy'm asked them, do you trust him? And all KB says is, he's gotten us this far, but I don't trust him, which is an interesting, perplexing situation to be in, right? If this person has saved your life and helped you get closer to home, but I still don't trust him. So what do I do? And it, again, not to get too deep, but it's an interesting spot for a child to be in, right? I don't trust this person. They haven't hurt me yet, but I don't think they're good for me. And that's a tough spot for a kid to be in. So
it's a very tough spot.
Yeah. But it was interesting because Khy'm also knew that she said, "Did he tell you to trust your gut?" Like, she knows Crimson Jack's way of doing things, and KB, recognized that she knew what he had asked her. So, but they do get back to the ship, and the kids confront Jod, and Fern brings in SM-33 to kind of press him a little bit further. And Jod admits finally that he's not a Jedi. He says, "Well, I never said I was." Right. A really kind of Han Solo-y way out of it, right? He proposes a deal to them. He says that he'll do the right thing and maybe get a reward. And then he says, "I'll be your partner." And the kids say, "You're not going to be a partner. You're going to work for us." And then Jod reluctantly agrees. Nick, what did you think of that interplay at the ship and the way the kids responded? And not just from a story perspective, but also from a production, direction, and acting perspective.
It continues to drive plucky kids lost in a galaxy. It can't just be, this is how Goonies happened. This is how Space Camp happened. This is how, all these movies that we watched as kids that when we were younger, like, they have agency, they have some spunk. Fern's kind of the leader, Whim's in for the adventure, Neil's our careful, calculated, and KB's a little bit of our wild card. Yeah. They're all out there doing something, but they also have their head on their shoulders, which I love. They're paying attention, even coming from this bubble, secure, safe planet. They're going, wait, something's funny here. And I think that's such a true attribution to, again, the nature of who kids are. Yep. As I've raised my kids, as I've watched other kids, like, kids will call you on your stuff. Kids will go, "What do you mean?" And even if it's literal, they're going to ask the question, go, "What do you mean?" You're like, "No, that's not what I mean. Here's what that means." And that, it's partially genuine and earnest, but it's also self-defense. It's also a way to, protect themselves. So I think it's fantastic. And I think it's the highlight of the show at this point is these kids and these actors. Full credit to these actors who are playing these roles. Yep.
Well, to escape this moon, they need to get to the other side where there's daylight before they can jump into hyperspace. So John hands the controls over to Neil, and he puts Fern and Wim on the guns and has KB handle all the coordinates for hyperspace. When Wim gets, as I just said before, when Wim gets in the gunning in the gun spot, he's excited. It's like this is what he's been waiting for, and then he hits an X-wing that's in pursuit, and he's just like it's Luke Skywalker when he got the first TIE fighter. He said, I got him. And the funny part, again, kids being kids, Fern said that was my shot. But it was really cool to see them kind of fight through and fight to get out the way they did. And so just the directing, the way we see Wim in the bubble of the gun, and just the wide-eyed excitement on his face. They do, of course, barely escape. They get out there and back on by the X-Wings come in, they land by Khy'm, and they said that they didn't engage because they didn't want to hurt the children, which was interesting. And the pilot says, where were they headed? And Khy'm says cryptically, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And then they end the season. What did you think of those X-Wings? Are they Republic X-Wings?
You know what I thought about those X-Wings. You know who
we expected to see.
I fully expected, and not fully expected. There was that part of me 50-50 that was like, ooh, I hope Carson Teva is one of these pilots. And at the same time I went, he doesn't have to be every X-Wing pilot.
Right.
So at the end of the day, these were unidentified X-Wing pilots out on patrol, which also does track with this New Republic era, this post Return of the Jedi. You've got pilots out there, and some of them may be working for government. Some of them may be free agents. We don't know. I could go buy at a state auction a retired state trooper car or a retired police car. So I could go free agent myself out there. Maybe that's what these guys are doing. We don't know. They could be private security, but it's fun to see an X-Wing. It's always fun to see an X-Wing, to see a chase, to see some shots fired. And, I think, again, also, and maybe I'll say for these first 3 episodes, every one of them has ended on a cliffhanger-y kind of situation.
Right.
Or not even, I won't say a cliffhanger. They've ended at the right time. The endings have been perfect all 3 episodes so far.
Yep, it hasn't felt like. I mean, that was one of the problems with Ahsoka and one of the problems with Acolyte. It was like, oh, we have to make this into 2 episodes. So
wait, we're done now. Like it felt like weird cuts.
And to your point too, it did feel like a lot of those 70s and 80s shows that we liked, where it would end and you'd be like, that's the whole story. Like this was the whole story. They got out of jail and they escaped and they found out where they need to go next. They had a little adventure along the way, and if the series ended here, obviously there would be a lot of unanswered questions, but it could. It could. All we know is that they're on their way to the next thing. So
it's not quite the Dukes of Hazzard. The General Lee is frozen midair as it's jumping the creek, and they say, "Let's see what happens next week."
Right.
Not quite that extreme.
Not quite that extreme, but yes, enough to make you definitely want it to come back for sure.
Yes.
Well, that's the way that episode went. That was the beat by beat. We got a lot to look forward to next week, but there are some Easter eggs and some buried treasure that we want to talk about real quick. All right, Nick. Well, there were a couple of things that we saw. Why don't we kind of go back and forth like we did before and just kind of see what we got. We'll go till we run out. It's one of those things where the first time I watched it, I was like, yeah, not a lot of Easter eggs. I watched the second time, I was like, wow, there was a lot more stuff in there. The stuff that the first one that I'll throw out there was Wim used the Obi-Wan quote about that the Jedi are the defenders of justice, keepers of peace in the galaxy. He says everybody knows that. But what was interesting was, and I think again more just a tip to the story and the isolation of the children, is Wim says the Jedi are the defenders of justice and keepers of peace in the galaxy. And we know that this story takes place after Return of the Jedi, so they've been gone for a while.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic one. I have a couple. One of my favorites. It's not a great secret that I am a deep, deep lover of Star Tours.
Yes.
And all the mythology and the things that go around Star Tours. So we do get the Star Tours, the 1000, the ship that is, the vehicle that you get to ride in on Star Tours. It's in the background right there around Port Borgo when they're doing their thing. It's another one of those teases, like all the ship scene in Rise of Skywalker, and you're picking out which one is here, which one is here. That Star Speeder 1000 in the background, just like 80s, 90s vibes, Star Tours. It begs the question, Disney, are we going to add a Port Borgo stop into the Star Tours video? Because we've updated it many times over the years.
They absolutely
has to be on deck.
And I'll tell you what, let's get rid of some of the stuff in Galaxy's Edge and put Port Borgo there. I would rather hang out in Port Borgo than Oga's Cantina. Sorry, no offense to those that love it.
New Orleans Square, where Pirates of the Caribbean is. Just give us the Star Wars.
Let's take over all of Disney. Let's take over all of Disney World. Let's do that.
Yep.
This is one that I don't know if it's true or not, but it's the way I picked up on it. I didn't hear anybody else talk about it on any of the other shows, but it looks like a Corellian blood stripe on Jod's pants, the pants that he found in the ship. So in my mind, I'm going with that. I'm going for the stripe on the pants being Han Solo like. So which would make sense. Again, I feel like Jod is kind of Han Solo meets Obi-Wan Kenobi in this show.
Mm-hmm. I think that's and that's a perfect, he's the scoundrel. What is his deal?
Yes.
We're very much in scoundrel testing mode, as we'll call it. I wanted to talk about Khy'm for just a second.
Sure.
Khy'm was such a fun character. The vibes, and this comes back to all of our 80s callbacks. For anybody who watched The Dark Crystal in the 80s, the Dark Crystal vibes that come with Khy'm, comes with Afra, depending on how you pronounce that. You've got the telescope, you've got this creature, you've got all these like orbs and rotations. It is 100% feeding into that same nostalgia. And so we just keep expanding. We keep talking about Goonies and E.T.
Yeah.
But every week we're expanding the canon of what are the references, what are the things we're pulling from even more.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's I didn't even think of that one, but it's funny. I didn't think of that specifically, but I knew I recognized it, which is really
it's a sense memory thing. And we talked about with Greg earlier, it's something that sticks out for you. It wasn't put that way to intend that, but when people watched Dark Crystal back in the day, it planted itself in your memory and you go, I've seen that before. Where have I seen that?
Yep. The last Easter egg I'll point out, again, there's always 1,000 of them, and there are people who do Easter egg videos much better than we do. Check those guys out. These are things that sort of stuck with me that again, this is why this episode was A New Hope to me, because the droid that was floating through the hallway that KB picked up on was a silver version of the torture droid from A New Hope. And it complete with a very similar sound. It sounded like a cross between the one in A New Hope and a probe droid, but it was that same kind of model. And again, a callback to stuff we know without it being overt.
Yep. I have one other one. This was something else that I saw online. I know that our friends at Children of the Watch tweeted this out. Somebody else had tweeted a similar version of it. And so I went and did a little comparison and made these graphics myself. The badges and the planet map. Fern, the badge on the back of her backpack and the map that Khy'm lays out. If you overlay it with that Imperial graphic, the 8 points, the planets, the positioning,
look at that.
They line up, and that creates this intrigue of it's too coincidental, but it's two separate things. It's the patch on the bag, and I know people have kind of depicted or interpreted, what are the graphics, what are the signs, what do the Arabesh mean? But I saw that, and then I couldn't not see it every time, the way different parts of that line up. So I thought that was really cool and maybe feeds into what is the mystery? What is the conspiracy of what's going on here? Who's connected to it?
That's wild. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things. I had a theory about add-in that I shared on Screen Crush this week, that to me, it's the planet that is the First Order. They're building the First Order right now. They're building the paper pushers and the analysts and the financial guys. And then they try to figure out in these tests where these kids should go. And maybe Wim has tested out, and maybe he'll be put to another part of the planet where they train soldiers and sort of their more military type of kids. The challenge with At being a part of the First Order is, and again, I said this on Screen Crush as well, and I'll say it here, is it makes it very difficult to have a happy ending for the show. If the kids go back home, and it turns out home is the First Order sort of genesis, that's not a happy ending. And the kids are back with their families, great, but they're doing bad things. So I don't know that that's exactly what I think your idea of it being sort of a money laundering kind of thing is a little bit better. Maybe the kids get there, see that it's not good, especially after they've seen the rest of the galaxy or more of the galaxy, and maybe they don't stay. Maybe they make the decision to leave. But yeah, I think that's I think and I saw somebody say something, and Chris Ryans, if you're listening, I'm apologizing in advance. Somebody was saying, well, maybe Wim is Finn. He's not, but the only way I will say that's connected is maybe this is how they found some soldiers and they put them to work. The kids that weren't going to be financial analysts and whatever number crunchers were put into the army. But I don't know. Do you any comments on that, Nick?
No, I mean, again, similar apologies to Chris. Probably not, but we do hear, kids being kidnapped, kids being, conscripted. Jana was the same way, taken from families, taken into. So it's all on the table at this point, because that's the part of the galaxy and the universe and the timeline that those things are happening. Those foundations are being built for what the new order, First Order, Final Order is going to be.
Right. Yep. Well, Nick, anything else to add to this week's episode?
I have one final thing I want to add. I want to talk about KB for just a quick second. KB, like I said, it's kind of our wild card of the four kids. Has the digital implants. We hear at the very beginning when the parents are together, her moms are saying we've lost connection with her, and I forget the word they used, her life monitoring system.
Life monitor system or something. Yep.
Something like that. And so it creates the question, and there's two things, because also we kind of get these little is KB maybe force sensitive? They hint at that. They're in the hallway, they're the whatever, and she has a moment, but it's when that droid comes across that you're talking about. So is it an electronic thing that's connected to the visor and, all of that? This is not as much a theory, but they did call it a health life monitoring thing. It could be a plot point. If you remember one of the classic movies of the 90s, Con Air, we have Baby-O, played by Bubba Blue from Forrest Gump. He's Nicolas Cage's friend, and he's the one, he has the diabetes issue. And so in the middle of this movie, when the plane is happening and all these other crazy things are going on, he's got to get the insulin for his friend.
Yeah.
I think we're headed to a situation where in the middle of the adventures, the things that are going on, maybe KB has a health thing, because they say, and I saw somebody else tweet about it, and it was kind of in the background dialogue, has health needs or special health. They say something to that effect.
Right.
So what if KB has some sort of health thing that in the midst of this journey and this adventure, they're going to also have to figure out how to save their friend, which adds layers of development and adventure, and Jod's going to have to make a decision. Yeah, it adds, he's going to have to make a decision. He's going to pretend it's just a kid, but then is the better part of him going to get over? Are the kids going to force him into it? Yeah. KB brings the ability, not as a liability, mind you, but brings the ability to add so much more, because it's the character that we've seen them, but I feel like we've seen the least of them. So I'm very intrigued by KV and that character.
I agree 100% on that. I think that's actually, it's funny. You texted me, you said, I have some thoughts on KB. And I said, I think we're thinking the same thing. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking that's going to become a plot piece, because even if they do have the proper coordinates from Khy'm, we've seen other planets and other drama happening in the series. So which either A, do they actually have the right coordinates, or is it going to take them somewhere nearby?
Well, it's Star Wars. No one can ever go directly from point A to point B. There's true. Always something or two or three somethings that are going to show up in between.
Yep. That's absolutely correct. So, well, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. I do agree with you. I do think we're going to see a situation where they're going to have to help her in order to get home. And I think, similar to E.T., right? E.T. suddenly becomes ill, and it's heartbreaking. And this that would be, it just seems to make sense. So, but Nick, that's going to do it for our second episode of Beyond the Barrier, exploring the mysteries of Skeleton Crew. I got to say, these first 3 episodes are just the beginning, and I can't wait to see where the show is going to take us next.
Just need it to be Tuesday again.
Yes, bring on the Tuesday. So, remember, your input makes the show even better. So if you got theories, or if you spotted some Easter eggs that we missed, or you just want to debate that family tree of Gorian Shard's cousin or something, let us know. Call us at 504-321-1501. You can join us as a patron, or you can reach out to us on social media. We'll play your voicemails next week if you leave us something this week, and we'll make sure to get it on there. And that even includes if you happen to live in Enid, Oklahoma, and you want to talk to some guys at the liquor store about Skeleton Crew, right. Matt, we'll take it. We'll definitely play it on here for you. But if you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to give us a like, share it with your fellow Star Wars fans, and subscribe so you won't miss what's next. And for our podcast listeners, we'd love it if you gave us a 5-star review. It's the next best thing to a map to Atten.
I'm excited to do this again. Why can't it be Tuesday yet? That's really all I'm worried about at this point. But until it is Tuesday, and until next time, Pete, may the Force be with you.
Always.